Hello everybody, my name is James, and for the benefit of those listening back to the audio, you're listening to Ask James, my regular YouTube live stream where I welcome questions from the YouTube community on anything football related. To timestamp this, it's just gone 2 p.m. on Friday, September the 20th. I think we've got the majority of information in from press conferences ahead of the kickoff for game week 5. Unai Emery will be doing his press conference as per usual very late after the conclusion of this stream. As per usual, I'll be going through the questions in order of submission. If there's anything that's a repeat or slash similar, I will probably skip through it, but I've got no major announcements, so I'll get straight into the questions. Aaron Hill says, "Hi James, I asked you this last week, but still really unsure on which one to sell between Jota and Diaz to bring in Salah. You said Diaz last week, still feel that way." We didn't do it last week. I think, as it is now, I'd possibly be slightly higher on Diaz than Jota if I was investing in one new. That said, to counter that, I think Gakpo feels like a bigger threat right now than Núñez. And it's not to say that Núñez couldn't start tomorrow. He may very well do so. I think on that basis, I thought Gakpo played quite well Tuesday night as well. I watched the game. Arne Slot said that the intention had been to start Gakpo last weekend. But Diaz returns from the internationals in better condition than Gakpo. I don't think there's a real reason to believe that Diaz wouldn't start tomorrow, and I feel similar about Jota. I've seen one prominent Liverpool account today predict that neither Jota or Diaz starts tomorrow. It's just a prediction. I think probably both do start tomorrow. I think it feels to me like Gakpo is a bit of a bigger threat as it stands. So it'd still be the same answer, Aaron. Yeah, be sell Diaz first. I realise Diaz is getting the investment. I can see that. Aaron Hill says, also, do you think a -4 to be able to start Bumo over Havertz or Murphy is worth it? All the best. A -4 to bring Bumo in. Listen, he's going to be front and centre of a lot of stuff next week, I should imagine. Wouldn't necessarily be taking a -4 to bring him in. I think Jacob Murphy probably does start for Newcastle, and Kai Havertz obviously will certainly start for Arsenal, so a probable no there. FPL Dunn says, "Hi James, on the differential, so you said you might be taking Haaland on long term. Any further thoughts on this? I'm in the same boat." No, I haven't thought about it at all. Been kind of knee deep in just making sure I've got the right information of team news for our Patreon stream later today, so I won't think too much about my own FPL team till later today, but I'm happy to share what I shared on for the patrons this morning, that I'm thinking about 2 free transfers for 2 forwards. I have 2 free transfers, moving Isak and Muniz to a combination of Solanke and Vardy, or Solanke and Stewart, or Vardy and Stewart. Those are the 3 forwards under consideration. Stewart obviously would just be as a substitute option. That allows me to buy potentially Gabriel from Nedeljkovic next week, rather than just going, say, Robertson to Gabriel. But I do think, if I commit to the 2 free transfers now, particularly on the 2 higher price tickets there, and I realise Vardy is not a high price ticket, but if I commit to Solanke and Vardy, despite the fact to be putting more money in the bank and take me up to sort of around about 2 million in the bank, I think it's going to cut me off of Haaland, I think. So on the face of it, there's probably the transfers I want to do. By the way, there's nothing I saw on Solanke on Wednesday that would make me want to buy him, but he wasn't playing with Son, Kulusevski, Maddison behind him, and he will be tomorrow. That's the 2 that I want to buy, really, but it's going to cut me off. Because I'm definitely buying a third Arsenal asset next week. So then I go into game week 7, this swing of City's great run of fixtures, and I've got 1 free transfer. And I'll be back in a position where it becomes a -8 to put Haaland in. And so you can say, right, skip 7, skip 8, game week 9. What's the chance of me running through this period with no issues, nothing else I want to change? It's not likely. There's other things I want to do. They also spoke about looking at manipulating to obviously get Haaland back in over that period. And of course, having him in is the right thing to do, I think, for nearly everybody. I just don't like the look of my team, and as I'm going to do it. So yeah, I think as it stands, and I'm not promising this by any means, right? As it stands, yes, I probably am likely to continue taking him on, even through City's next good fixture swing from game week 7. That's the most. I wouldn't even say it's the plan at the moment. I think that's the most likely solver. But I'm going to spend some more time looking at my own team again tonight. And we'll make some decisions from there. So I have to be conscious. Yes, Vardy, Solanke, probably the preference for me, but it's going to cut me off for Haaland. FPL Don says, can you recap post game week 7 wildcard opportunities? I'm only seeing a small gain in my team if I play it next game week, but I'm not seeing a better time to do it. Yeah, I've covered this to death, to be honest. Nearly every week it's the same answer for me. That I think if you're sort of game week 8, I kind of understand. Like if people are like heavily invested in, say, Chelsea, for example, and maybe Liverpool, particularly those two teams, and it's getting towards the end of Villa's run. Like if you have really good coverage of those three teams, getting towards game week 8 and wildcard, I can kind of understand it. Villa still have a good couple afterwards, but Liverpool, Chelsea playing each other in game week 8, I can understand at that point. People still doing it sort of about then. From that point, no, I feel like there's a dead period between sort of 9 and 13. I've spoken about this a lot, where I don't think it's particularly on. So there's some swings in there, like Wolves in 10, Brighton in 12, but not with the other kind of premium assets that you want. So I think between 9 and 13 is kind of a dead space. I'm not a huge fan of 14. I know a few people are, though. Then there's a jump to 16, but I think 17 looks rough. Then I like game week 18. So I think most who haven't used it are probably leaning towards doing it now or next week. And generally speaking, everybody's different with their own circumstance. But I think, next week looks a great week to wildcard for me. Jake says, hi James, hope all is well. Can't believe I'm asking this, but assuming I should still start Minter over Murillo this week, even though it's probably unlikely Minter starts by the sound of things. So, I mean, I'm not sure that I would say Minter's unlikely to start. I think a few of the Brighton guys on our Patreon have stressed a little bit of caution that he may not start. He's still in my predicted team for this week, and I know Suja's got him. We spoke about it this morning and said, look, you've got to recognise that might be a problem next week. I think also Minter to Sade might be quite a popular move next week for those with Minter. I could see that. Similar price. Sade's potentially going to play OOP. I think we get that answer tomorrow, and I think that probably will be the circumstance. I can see that sort of move being quite attractive for people. But yeah, I'd be starting Minter, mate. Steve says, hi James, hope all's well. Would you play Saliba or Robinson? Also Rodgers or Smith Rowe. Cheers. Rodgers definitely for me over Smith Rowe. Not a slight on Smith Rowe, just I would want to play Rodgers. Saliba Robinson's a bit of a coin flip. I feel like when it's this close like this, there's a case to say you should side with the really outstanding defensive team, and that's Arsenal. Pep himself has said this morning, or this afternoon rather, that he expects the game to be very similar to the two very, very tight matches from last season. I think most people are of the opinion it's going to be very low scoring. And therefore it could easily be settled in a similar way to how the North London derby was last week, right? So I think my preference on that is Saliba. I'm not someone who's been hugely high on Robinson anyway, so I might be the wrong person to ask. But I think I'd actually take a small preference for Saliba. I also understand that the majority of you have got Haaland, and therefore you don't want to play the Arsenal defender. And if I was in that circumstance and I had Haaland and I had that sort of debate, I would probably play Robinson. And so under that circumstance, the answer for the majority of you is Robinson. For me, if you're without Haaland, double down and play Saliba. Louis says, going to listen to this whilst on the indoor bike. Thanks, James, for the content you guys provide. Consistently getting me through mundane chores. You're very welcome, mate. Hope you enjoy the indoor bike. Joe Corley says, thoughts on Archer as a 1 week punt to make money for Saka to Salah. Hang on. I've just realised what you said to me there. To make money for Saka to Salah, what, this week? You not want Saka next week? We spoke about this a lot last week, right? And you could get it, the two fiction. It's just one game now. If I was a Saka owner, I would not be selling him this week. If I do buy Solanke and Vardy, there's a fair chance I might even bench him, by the way, this week. If I just buy one, then he starts for me. No, I wouldn't be forcing that. I get it. Salah for me is probably best captaincy option this week, but I don't think I would. I'm not keen on Archer either, Joe, to answer your question. I'd almost rather you came down further for Stuart. As per Clash of Correspondence yesterday, Matt Samuel thinks he'll start Archer. Transfer waiting to happen, in my opinion. Stavros says, hi, James, replacement for... Mind you, hang on. That's a different point. I'm just trying to think here. You haven't given it the context. Maybe you're wildcarding next week, aren't you? Okay, I get that more. You have said 1 week punt. Yeah, look, if you're on a 1 week punt, if you're wildcarding 6, I don't mind it. Let me sell it like that. I said transfer waiting to happen. If you don't need to worry about the transfer waiting to happen, I wouldn't bother. You definitely want Saka for 6. So if you're wildcarding in 6, yeah, sure, fine, do it. Stavros says, hi James, replacement for Isak in case that we do not have news if he will feature tomorrow. Havertz and Pedro are the other 2 forwards that I have, thank you. I'm probably going to, well, I'd say probably, I really haven't decided yet. But I suspect I'm going to take a chance on Dom Solanke. Didn't look 100% in a week. Ollie Watkins didn't look 100% before last week. I think he will have benefited from, the minutes against Arsenal and then another hour in midweek. I'm certain it was pre-planned. He was only going to play an hour in midweek. Tottenham obviously struggled to create chances for him against Arsenal. Great opponent. Tottenham didn't create anything for him on Wednesday. What was playing behind him was horrendous. Maddison and Kulusevski came into the game and made the difference. And perhaps if Solanke had still been out there, he'd have been on the end of one of those moments in the last 10 minutes. So, yeah, he's not quite there yet. But also, one of the things I really like about Solanke as the replacement for Isak is, I think if you do look at Tottenham's run until going to Manchester City in game week 12, over that period from now to game week 12, so including game week 11 but not 12, I've got Tottenham around about 4th on my ticker over that period. So it's pretty strong. And Newcastle over that same period ranked really badly. But then Newcastle come back into good fixtures from around about then. They go away to Nottingham Forest in 11, then West Ham at home in 12. So I'm almost looking at flipping that back maybe in around about 6-7 weeks and going without Isak for this period. That's one of the reasons I like it like that. It's also worth saying that Jamie Vardy, Dominic Calvert-Lewin fall into very similar categories if you want to save the money, but then moving that then back to Isak is more difficult. I'm quite cautious about what I'm doing with my strategy in terms of structure. So I even like the fact that Vardy, therefore also similarly, holds quite well till Brighton's swing of fixtures. I'm looking at those two and thinking, right, so if I go that way, that's front three set, forget about it, bar injury, and go, that's what it's going to be, stick with it. And then further on the line, it's Vardy back to João Pedro, probably, especially based on Fabian Hertzler's comments about João Pedro being so important to them. And then Solanke back to Isak. That needs an awareness of having some money available. Could also be that it's Watkins to Isak at that point. But I like Villa have a couple of difficult games, but I like the fact they have some good home fixtures after those couple of difficult games. I'm liable just to stick it out with Ollie, I think, unless John Duran keeps nicking minutes off him significantly, which he may well do, but I think we're going to see more of them together, actually. So Solanke is going to be the answer. It's worth saying, if it's next week, the answer to that would be Havertz. You've already got Havertz in your case, but just for clarity, because I know some people will certainly be thinking that, I think Isak to Havertz will be a very popular move next week. I prefer the double Arsenal defensive personally as well. Joe Pickles says bench 1 out of Saka, Isak, Smith Rowe, Eze, Rodgers. Obviously, whichever I bench will score the most happened with Saka game week 4 and Eze game week 3. Robinson, Saliba I've covered, Joe, so I think you've got your answer on that. From that lot, it's ridiculous, but it's probably Saka. I do have an inkling that Isak's not going to make it. I don't have anything inside on that at all. I just have an inkling that he's not going to make it. I maybe have talked myself into that because I'm considering selling him. I would probably say Saka from that. I suspect all of those players will be on my benching dilemmas for the deadline stream in the morning. I think Saka might rank the lowest of it. Michael Radley says, hi mate, loving the content, including the new Clayton and James show. Thank you, mate. Says bench 1, Pedro, Woods, Smith Rowe and Rogers. Also, match results aside, how does Anfield rank on your list of away days? For your FPL question from that lot, tough. I'd want to play the two, well, almost the three furthest forward. I think it's arguably Smith Rowe. Probably. On Anfield, yeah, good away day, mate. I like Liverpool. Me and Nico were speaking about Liverpool and Nico's corner earlier this week, and I bantered it a bit, but I know I like Liverpool as a city. Yeah, I think now they've redone the Anfield Road a bit better. Obviously went in the springtime. It was the first time I'd been there for a long time. Atmosphere wasn't great, but actually I think that would be unfair to compare that to others because Liverpool had just fallen out the title race and kind of a nothing game for Liverpool really, and also a little bit for my team as well. So yeah, I like Anfield. It's still got a bit of character about it and stuff. Not like some of the older ones because the majority of it has been rebuilt over the last 20 to 30 years or so. Pretty much, yeah, a little bit longer than the main stand opposite where the tunnel is. Was longer ago. Yeah, Anfield's good away day, mate. Who's next? BMax says, no question, James. Just a thanks for the great content, particularly the COC. Smash a like, people. I presume that's the COTC, Clash of Correspondence. Yesterday with Matt and Paul, Southampton, Ipswich. You must all see Paul's face when it dawns on him that Tyler Dibbling might be the best 4.5 million midfielder in the game. You know, that look on his face as if to go, and you're going to buy him now. Next up is Francis Logan plays Semenyo or Garnacho. Arsenal goal was a foul. Nah, I'm not having all that. Romero's got to be better there, mate. If he falls to the floor, yeah, it probably is, but I'm not up for debating it. Garnacho for me, mate. Not a certain starter. I think Diallo played really well last week, but I think Garnacho, I'm convinced he's going to be a player we all want during the course of this season, and he's in my plans within this period coming up to potentially bring into my team, actually. So Garnacho. Ben Wodge just says, afternoon, mate. Hope you and family are well. Start on Ketcher or Rogers this week. Really like Eddie's stats. I mean, if you've got a player like Nketiah, you're starting that, I think. Yeah, I think so. Joe Pickles says, I know you said in pre-season you were confident of an Arsenal title win this season. Have your feelings changed? 5 points clear of them if we beat them Sunday, and I actually think we will beat them. Yeah, I think City will win Sunday as well, very narrowly. The only thing that's changed, my feeling on Arsenal hasn't changed. There's a couple of points. One, what I said on Monday a little bit about Odegaard's absence, if it is bad and we feel like as this week's progressed, it may be, that his absence will be felt more for Arsenal in actually some of the easier fixtures maybe. And when you're going up against City, you can't afford to be dropping points in these games, and Arsenal will obviously, with the Champions League, want to rotate a little bit in some of these fixtures a little bit as well. So it might be that his miss is actually felt harder after this week, Martin Odegaard. If he's out for, like, you know, if it becomes like the situation like it was with Maddison last season, then I think Arsenal are going to find out really tough. That's a game changer for me, because I think it's the one player that when they themselves are facing that low block, they really need Martin Odegaard on that pitch. I think probably if there is a change, I do still think Arsenal will win it. But I feel better about City than I did in pre-season. I think like the little nuances to De Bruyne's positioning, Haaland looking back to his absolute monster best. There are things in City that make me feel that there is a refresh that has happened without a big overhaul of the team. They feel fresher to me, and I think one of the real concerns in the window was there was times last year where I felt like they needed a freshness, and I don't think they had a huge freshness in the window. I think Savinho obviously really good addition to the squad in terms of being a kind of a Mahrez profile type replacement. I thought KDB was beginning to become a problem, but on what I've seen so far this season, it's arguably become the solution again. So I feel better about City. But I think Arsenal now know what it takes, I think. It'll be close. It's going to be them two again, pretty confident. Nothing on Sunday is going to define the final outcome. I don't think it's too early in the season for that. Bad Company says, if you could only go to one Spurs away game next season, where would it be, including Champions League, etc.? Well, Champions League semi-final, I suppose, then, mate. Don't suppose we'll be in that. But if you're asking me the question, then that's what it is. If I could only go to one, you almost asking me like what my favourite away day is, isn't it? If I could only go to one away game next season, I don't have a huge preference like that, mate. I'm trying to, when the fixtures are, how well we're doing at the time. I'm liable to say a big cup game, actually, or a European game, yeah, rather than a league game, and therefore I can't really answer that. Murphy says, hi James, 2 free transfers with Isak, Muniz and no bench, wildcarding next week. Which 2 1-week punts up front do you fancy for 14.5 million combined? Currently looking at Vardy and maybe Solanke. I don't think I need to answer this, do I, Murphy? So I think one of the appeals of those 2 players is this week looks good as well, right? It's not to underestimate Brentford particularly. But, home fixtures against Brentford and Everton for 1 weekers, it's pretty good, isn't it? Kim said, hi James, how do you think Solanke will do this weekend? I guess if I'm investing because I think he scores, right? Let's hope he can do that. Yeah. Do I expect him to go mad? No way. Certainly, I'd mentioned on Monday that I wouldn't rule him out of even captaincy this week. No, wouldn't. That wouldn't be under consideration if I bought him in. So let me put it that way. Shafwan says, hi James, if I aim to go for a 1-week punt on a Spurs midfielder, except for Son, who would you recommend? Kulusevski probably his most informed. Minutes are a concern. No, there's no concern for Kulusevski's minutes. There's every chance you'll get 90 tomorrow as well. Probably plays in the same central position, possibly forced a little bit by Odobez's injury as well. I would expect Johnson to play again. Son obviously plays, Solanke plays. So I think it'd be Kulusevski, Maddison. Big news for Tottenham today as well is that Ibasuma's trained. It's massive. He was a real miss for us last weekend. He was outstanding at Newcastle and I think just brings greater energy to the team and it needs it at the moment. So yeah, I think Kulusevski would be the one over Maddison or Johnson at this minute in time. The only thing I'd say about Johnson is, look, he obviously takes the goal really well. He'll arguably get into better positions. And I'm not his biggest fan, but I've always said about him, like, even off the bench and stuff, he can return. With Odobez's injury, Johnson's expected minutes goes up, I think. But then he could always bring like a Werner on for him. We think Werner is okay, actually, because he came off the other night as well. Johnson went on a bit of a streak of returns around February time. Even as like a substitute and stuff. February going into March, we started returning. And that also came after a period we received a lot of stick from the supporters. And many of you will have heard he obviously shut down his Instagram last week because he'd received some stick, which is online stuff, unfortunately. So I'd factor that in. But I think for 1 weeker, like, it's every chance Johnson returns, but you might be a little bit more chance for Kulusevski explosion, maybe. So, yeah, if it were me, I think I'd go Decky, yeah, which is Kulusevski. FPL developer says, hi James, with uncertainty with Isak and João Pedro and having Smith Rowe, which one of these 3 would you leave on the bench? Still Smith Rowe. Yeah, I think that in Isak's case, he'll either play or he won't. Feels like a little bit more of a chance that João Pedro will be sub. But I think João Pedro will start as well. B-Max says, well, just one question then. If going double Arsenal defence, Havertz or Saka, the best third pick, Saka, for me, mate, comfortably. Was he been involved in all but one of Arsenal's goals so far? Sounds very talisman to me, that. And I'd be more comfortable. There's every chance I'm going to captain Saka game week 6, 7 and 8. There's a possibility. So Saka for me. I would not feel comfortable thinking I might be captain Havertz for 3 weeks. No, Saka for me. David Fawn says, thanks as always. A bit of a long one on wildcard 6. Currently having to start 4 at the back with Robinson because of Muniz, Murphy and Barco all non-starters. Also a bit worried as a Brighton fan about Minter, and I have Isak too. Would you go Isak to Solanke or just go Muniz to DCL or Murphy to Rodgers and have Robinson as a backup in case Isak is a no-show? Because you're not wrong there, David. These are terrible for reading out on the audio podcast, so sorry to our audio listeners. Out of that, what would I prefer? The biggest problem you've got there right now looks like it's Muniz. So there's your answer. Uros Milicevic side James, 3 free transfers and wildcard 6. Plan was to move Saka and Haaland to Salah and Watkins / Solanke. Would you spend a third transfer to move a mid to Sam Palmer or a defender to Porro Robertson, or save the transfer? Save. Bloody hell, before I wildcarded in 3, I wish I hadn't bought Muniz in 2, mate. Getting in Salah and Watkins, completely understandable if that's what you want to do. He says, or leave Saka and Haaland and deal with Isak and Pedro. Right, so now we're very complicated, aren't we? I mean, yeah, I'd be quite tempted to deal with Isak, but wait for late tonight. With Newcastle travelling down to London, there may well be some information tonight. Hasselbank wins to 7 defeats in 11, 44 points from the last 32 Premier League fixtures, still can't defend set pieces, head lost with reporters. Are the alarm bells ringing yet? If this was Mourinho, the narrative flips. I did a huge piece on this on our Patreon podcast on Wednesday about Ange. Can't really be bothered to repeat myself a lot. What I saw Wednesday night was concerning, but I'm more concerned with the personnel in the team. And that even goes when we've got our strongest team, which we'll probably will near enough have on the pitch tomorrow. It's going to be very close to our first choice 11 tomorrow. So so you expect the performance. The 44 points from 32 games, cool, fine. Certainly accept that. Not good enough. There's obviously a 2-month period in there where it was disastrous fucking mess because of injuries at the start. The finish to the season was bad, and I think Ange is quite responsible for that. The 7 defeats in 11 needs context. I spoke about it on Monday's podcast. I can't bother to repeat what the 7 games are again. Go and research it for yourself. In terms of the set pieces, yes, we conceded a set piece goal last week. I think that was an individual problem. We've actually improved defending set pieces so far this season. It's the first one we've conceded. Vicario is still a problem. I certainly accept that. The difference is, though, mate, Wednesday night was a horrendous watch. But that's real enough the first time under Ange that I really, really felt that. Chelsea away last year was also like a horrendous performance. Even when we lost 4-0 at Newcastle last season, the first 25 minutes was more enjoyable than just watching your average Mourinho game, mate. So there's a reason for why the narrative is, mate, like the unbearable football of that former manager. Yeah, Ange is trying to play an offensive style. We've got the highest ball possession in the league so far this season. I realise that's not equating to the chances that you would want in terms of creation, but I'm really convinced, and I spoke about this on Wednesday, and watching fucking shit backup players doesn't really change my opinion. I think we're on to good things, and I think we need patience. What you say on the numbers, the 44 from 32, yeah, don't look good. Not disagreeing, mate, but I think we're heading in the right direction. If we lose tomorrow, that opinion might change. I don't think we will. Greg Williams says, good afternoon, James. What do you think of Robinson to Aina and Isak to Watkins and use my 2 free transfers, or roll them? I mean, what's the desperation to move Robinson to Aina? Aina's got like Brighton away. He's had to get Watkins in. It must be. It can only be. No wildcard plan as yet, as have 2 Arsenal ready. Smash the like. I'm not going to read the last bit, Greg, but thank you. Yeah, okay. I mean, if you don't know when you want to use a wild card, then there's every case to say, yeah, use them. My intention would have been to roll this week, right? But Muniz and Isak are staring me in the face and potentially need dealing with. And it feels at this moment like the bigger mistake would be just to like ignore that. So I'm probably going to deal with it. Probably seems like you want to as well. I'm not a fan of the Robinson to Aina move. I actually prefer Alex Moreno, by the way. But I get it in terms of Aina's probably going to be the one that goes up in price first and stuff, so it gives you a little bit of protection for a while. Can't really give you a reason not to buy Watkins other than I wish you did it last week. Ben Thomas says, hi James, can you discuss the pros cons on Salah in this week in a double change to then captain him, or rolling the transfer resulting in 3 free transfers next week? By game week 7 I would have Boomo triple Arsenal. It sounds like you've answered your own question, Ben. So like I don't know what you want to do with them transfers, right? This is really difficult for me to like equate. If you're sitting there with like no Arsenal and be like, okay, you need to deal with that next week, right? So are you saying you're using the free transfers to get triple Arsenal and Bumo? That almost feels like the priority, but then Salah's obviously a great captaincy option this week, but then if you've got the robot, just put the armband on him, right? If you've got any doubt. So it feels more like there's more power to come for you, but I can't see your team, mate. Please don't put your whole team in because I'm not going to read it out, mate. Joey Kneecap says, hi, James. How do you rate Harry Kane compared to other Premier League legends such as Gerrard, Lampard, Shearer, Henry, Keane, and Aguero? I read Robbie Keane there. I'm sure you mean, obviously, Roy Keane. What's your top 5? Crap. Jeez. It's an out there question, isn't it? Top 2's Henry and Shearer. In terms of forwards, anyway. Your Keanes, your Vieiras. I mean, you haven't named Paul Scholes in there. Has got to be part of that conversation, as far as I'm concerned. Goes above some of the other names you put in there, in my opinion. Kevin De Bruyne, I think, is once he's gone, people go, "Jesus Christ, Kevin De Bruyne was good." You know, Kevin De Bruyne's is worthy of being put in there, I think, now as well. Top 5, definitely Henry, Shearer. It's difficult, right? Like, I mean, look at like Ryan Giggs' longevity for 20 years, and then on the flip of that as well, you think like the player that Ronaldo became at the point that he left, like, whew. So it's really difficult. You're measuring, Gig, where do you measure that? Giggs over 20 years versus Ronaldo becoming in front of our eyes the best player in the world. How do you measure that? That's tough. Forwards is Henry and Shearer, certainly for that. Kane, to go back to your point, it's easier if I just answer that, isn't it? Does Kane get in a top 5 there? No, not for me. No. If he came back and broke Shearer's record, then I think he does. But at the moment, no, he'd be outside the top 5, I think, for me. Good question. Colin Johnson says, afternoon, James. Vissa replacement, Vardy or DC? I already own Pedro. My preference is with Vardy. The reason the preference is there with Vardy is a personal one, I think, in the sense I'm quite comfortable benching him in 6. And I think if you remove the Arsenal game, I think Vardy's the better call. And that's what it comes down to. Now, for some of you, you're going to buy him. I'm going to play him at Arsenal next week. And I completely get that. And I think, my opinion would be at the moment, those who prefer Calvert-Lewin over Vardy are probably doing it on that basis. You don't want to look at Vardy away to Arsenal next week. And I get that completely. I should be in a position where I'm able to bench him. And therefore, the other weeks, I think Vardy, for me, is the better call. They're both an injury concern. I think it's worth stressing. I've spoken about Vardy holding for João Pedro sort of roundabouts game week 12. Like, I wouldn't have huge confidence on Vardy or Calvert-Lewin making it that far. One thing to dislike about Vardy is a little bit of the unknown on odds on Edouard. And Cooper has said this week that he sees him as a number 9, basically. But we know that Edouard can play wide. I think Vardy would have favouritism as first choice for the time being. I think that the fact that he's only playing once a week as opposed to the amount of minutes you look at, you got in the Championship last year, probably shouldn't compare about that. Vardy wants space, right? And that's easier for him in this league than actually in the Championship, arguably. So my preference is with Vardy. I've been clear on that. Brunton says, hi James, who am I dumping Muniz for? Already have Haaland, Isak. And trying to hold off wildcarding as long as possible. So looking at next 3-4, nothing in the bank. Again, if you're just looking at next 3-4, I can see why you would prefer Calvert-Lewin over Isak on that basis. Those are the ones, frankly. If you're selling Muniz, those are the ones. The other name I will put forward is Ross Stewart. I'll put Ross Stewart's name forward as a 4.5 forward who is going to get some minutes moving forward and potentially allows you different things. On the shorter period that you're looking at, because you probably don't want to look at Vardy at Arsenal next week, I can understand why you would pick Calvert-Lewin, but I feel like I've covered this enough now. FPL developer says, another one future planning related. Would you save your wild card if you could get to Bumo, Havertz and Raya with free transfers? It would mean keeping Salah, Trent instead, going Saka and Gabriel. What's the rest of your team like, mate? Wild card's not necessarily just about your best players, is it? What about the rest of the squad? Like, how well set is it? I don't really feel like I can truly give you the proper answer that you're looking for. On the face of it, like, if you can get what you want from the Arsenal players and Brentford players next week, there is a case to say, yeah, fine, hold it. But hold it for what? Hold it for when? You can't see the rest of your team, mate. Julian Snit says, hi, James. Differential captain with Trent or Solanke, or just stick it on Haaland. Don't have Salah or Watkins alternative. Yeah, look, I think if you've not got enough confidence in someone to say, yeah, I want to take Haaland on with this player, like, don't. Constantino says, hi James, thoughts on Brighton fixtures after 6? Do they still look fairly playable to you? Also, is Bumo worse with Vissa being off? Thanks. It's unknown on Bumo. Yeah, I think you can sell that either way and say, look, Vissa being there helps Brentford's attack, but it also means Bumo might hoover up a little bit more from a talisman perspective. So I think you can spin that narrative either way. In terms of Brighton's fixtures, yeah, look, he doesn't look great after this week. And arguably, Forest, we maybe should reconsider what we feel about them. Chelsea away, Tottenham at home, Newcastle away, Wolves at home, Liverpool away, City at home. Now, look, you could play João Pedro on all of them. Fine. But it's not great. It's not. And I think, especially if they blank this week, people are going to come off the Brighton attacking assets next week, I think, in most scenarios. Charlie says, hi James, any tips for not overthinking moves? I know you're good at not overthinking and just keen for any advice, as I spend all week contemplating moves. Drives me mad. Love your stuff, mate. Okay, it's a good question. I don't have a right or wrong here, because we're all wired different, right? So for me, I'm able to park it and think about the content, because for me the content is more important than my team. For most of you, that's not going to be the case, right? And if you say, oh really, content? Yeah, because what am I going to do? Oh, do I produce this bit of content, or do I focus on my team? I did the content, right? Worst case, we'd end up rolling a transfer of my team. So I have enough distractions in my life with the content, my son, Tottenham, not to get too bogged down with the FPL. Give you an example. I did a piece for advanced tier patrons on Wednesday. I got an answer to question as a follow-up on that yesterday afternoon, and I said, I've got to be really honest with you, and said, I went to commentary last night, I've been doing the content today, I haven't really thought about my team. I had a look at it quite a bit last night. I'm going to have another look. I haven't come to a definitive conclusion, and normally I would have. I needed some information on team news today. That's probably not forthcoming, so I'll make the decision tonight. But I think it's easier said than done, right? Once I make a conclusion on a decision that I want to make, that's it, I'm there. Not that I can't change, because I think you need when I do the deadline stream, I've normally kind of got my decision done. And there has to be a preparation to be flexible, but I'm not going to get swayed at that point. I think it's more difficult at this stage of the season than later on as well, because you have the kind of additional factors hitting you, such as wanting to increase value in your squad. I know it's obviously really important, for example. It is easier said than done. I get that. But you may also find that if you book a period of the day to actually sit down and look at something and say, do you know what? Can this wait? Here's an example. Price changes, to go back to value. They only change once a day. So if you look at something at 3 o'clock or 6 o'clock, if you can put yourself in a position where I'll switch off for that now. I'm not going to look at social media. I'm not going to listen to Planet FPL till tonight. That sort of thing might help, but at the same time, I don't think it's for me to tell someone else how they should feel, right? It's difficult, as I said right at the start of answering the question. We're all wired quite differently. I have enough distractions in my life to keep me busy. I guess that really helps, but I don't play with fear. I'm sitting there with no Haaland and no Salah. I don't play with fear, so I'll do well or I'll do bad. And either way, life carries on. That's that's how I am. I realise it's not so easy for everybody else. Tim Johnson says, hi mate, on wildcard 6, need a 1 week pump for Muniz. I'm going to skip. I think I've been clear on that, mate, but thanks for the question. Andrew Savage says, hi James, I'm on the same team as you. Right. I'd suggest you copy a different content creator, mate. Says, got 2 free transfers, thinking of Palmer to Salah and Isak to Calvert-Lewin, then Watkins to Haaland in 2 weeks' time with Salah down to someone. Thoughts? Good luck, mate, because it'll go wrong for you if you keep with the same team as me, I'm sure. James Wright says Jackson and Visser to Watkins and Stewart for a -4. Already play wildcards, so thinking long-term 6 weeks plus. Yeah, you'll get a thumbs up on me from there. James, if you're looking at long-term planning now, I'm going to guess you've looked at it, so I'm not going to talk you out of it, mate. Dermot Whelan says best Visser replacements. Again, I'm going to skip Dermot. I think I've done my piece on the Visser Muniz replacements, but thank you. Jason says, hi James, bench 1, start 1 and transfer 1 out of Isak, Pedro and Bailey. I'm not confident any of them are going to start, or should I just risk it, play 2 and roll? I think Bailey will play. I think Pedro will play. Isak's the one I'd have the biggest question mark on over. It was just a little bit where Eddie Howe said, we hope it's not too serious and stuff. What are you saying to me? It was not too serious. Play tomorrow. Sounds like maybe it's a no to me. Right? And listen, you read into Eddie Howe's comments. That's obviously quite dangerous. I recognise that. So I'd probably move Isak. It moves the most money. Again, I don't need to cover the forwards any more than what I already have. If you get stuck with Bailey, is another good fixture next week. João Pedro, you may want to move on, but if you moved Isak on, maybe you've got the money to move that on. Also, I think if Pedro's in the team, he's the one. Them hurts to the comments are really encouraging for João Pedro owners. I'd not want to be selling João Pedro this week. And he's added right at the end, of course, in the next comment. Wildcard next week, so it's just for this game week. Not helpful. I would be keeping Bailey and Pedro with the fixtures they've got, mate. There you go. Sam Megginson says, afternoon, James. If Pedro is out, no, well, we're not going to have that confirmation, are we? I don't think. Would you rather play Hall and roll into wildcard 6 or have a fun punt on Vardy, Calvert-Lewin? Cheers. Fun punt, mate. I also think there's a strong possibility that Lewis Hall won't play tomorrow. I know people made the connection like we did when Fabian Schär got suspended and went, when Schär's back, he might come back in, and that's what happened. I think Newcastle's problems that they had at Wolves last week were quite a bit down that side. And also, I think if you just think about the matchup, who's Hall playing against tomorrow? Adama Traore. Now, we know about Adama Traore and the baby oil and the end product, etc. But the Fulham fans will tell you he's playing quite well at the moment, and if he's at it, there's not a lot you can do to stop him. You're almost just hoping that he stops himself and makes a pig's ear of it. I think with that in mind, I think there's a fair chance Kelly will play tomorrow. So I'd factor that into your thinking. Next up is Jerry W. Says, hi James, non-FPL question first. Do you think Gary O'Neill is the most likely to be the first managerial casualty should he fail to win from game weeks 5 to 9? I mean, I've gotten bottom my ticker over that period. Villa, Liverpool, Brentford, City, Brighton. And with Villa, Brentford, Brighton being away, Liverpool, City at home. Difficult to foresee the points in that period. Yes, it could be. Could be. But isn't it Ange? No, it's not Ange. No, not Ange, no. Adam says, hey James, what's one word you'd use to describe the usefulness of Eddie Howe's pressers? Not. just not useful. It goes for a lot of managers, isn't it? How useful is Pep's words on De Bruyne today, for example? Nah, I don't know. Goes for most of them, doesn't it? John Sully says, hello James, I have Isak. Who would you place first sub? Murphy, whose minutes will surely increase if Isak is out, or Robinson for higher clean sheet odds, or would you use the free transfer for Watkins even if wildcard 6? I mean, if you think Isak isn't going to play and you go to Watkins for the week, I think you do it. In terms of your bench though, yeah, I mean, you've almost answered your own question, right? If Isak's out, Murphy almost definitely starts, mate. So it's that. Damien Bruin says, ever been South Africa? No, unfortunately not. Jerry W says, first FPL question is Forest defence worth considering for wildcard 6 of how solid they've been. Yeah, I'd recommend listening back to the piece I did on Forest on Monday's podcast, reviewing the victory over Liverpool, because I spoke about Forest assets quite a bit there. And I said, my kind of conclusion was that I thought Moreno would land on a lot of wildcard 6 teams. So, there's your answer. Darren Jenkins says, already done Delap for Muniz. Now Alisson injured, not worth a -4. Realistically, to get a keeper in, is it? Brentford back up as my second keeper. Best to just go with 10 this week. Well, the reality is Alisson could play, mate. And if you take a -4 for that, then yeah. If Arsenal had a great fixture and Liverpool were coming into a terrible run, you could maybe make a case to justify it a little bit. Well, no, is what it is, I think, mate. Damien says, best stadium you've ever been to and why? Whew. I've been blessed. I've been blessed. I've done the majority of them. I think the best for me is the Bernabeu. And I'd like to go again because I've modernised it a bit since I went in 2011. I said I've modernised it quite a lot, actually, in terms of the screens, the outside of the stadium, and also took these horrendous kind of boxes they had on the two of the corner sides, and they've wrapped it more and increased the capacity. So I think the Bernabeu is wow, because this is bad for the audio, but I'm going to say it's like this. It's just steep. It's not like one of them, like Wembley just kind of like just goes back and out. The Bernabeu, like even in the top tier, you feel like you're on top of the game and stuff. It holds the atmosphere incredibly. For me, that's the best one, is the Bernabeu. Ludwig says, hi James, current dilemma is between Calvert-Lewin and Bumo and Bowen, or Vardy and Palmer and Rodgers. If the latter, then I'd have to play Vardy against Arsenal next week. Yeah, Bowen's right on my radar as well for forthcoming weeks. So I kind of want to keep him within reach. I'm very conscious of that. I'll be honest, it feels to me like out of all that, the one I'd most want as just one individual is Bumo from next week. So I'm going to say that route, mate. Ahmed says, I've done his SAP replacements, mate. I've kind of done it to death, mate. I really have. Like, if you can get up to Watkins. If you want to come down, I think take a chance on Solanke. This is thinking beyond game week 6, by the way, as per the question. And then, you want to come right down. I've given you the 3 options I like down there. Which also means that Chris Wood is probably the one that will go off this week. JP says, what are your thoughts on Felix? In my opinion, biggest luxury playing, going, flopped everywhere. He's been shocking signing from Chelsea. I actually thought, JP, that he had a really positive influence for Chelsea when he came on last weekend. When he came on the pitch, it was the first time I felt that they actually had control of the match. We'll see. Do I understand Chelsea buying him? Well, it was obviously to do with the Conor Gallagher deal, wasn't it? Let's be honest. But I actually thought he had an impact on that match last week. Michael Scott says, hi James, would you play Smith Rowe at home to Newcastle or Wood away to Brighton? I'd pick the talisman, mate. I'd go with a forward there. Jerry says, second FPL question. Would you go with only Haaland as your City asset if you're in a position to wildcard 6 like me? Or is Foden worth a look? I mean, Haaland is hoovering up so much of the City points at the moment that, yeah, I think we can... I spoke about this a few weeks ago. We can get a bit obsessed with, they've got great fixtures, the great team, I must have 3 from them. And ignoring, like, that there might be a better talisman at another team. So an example of that would be, let's give you an example. Cole Palmer comes into difficult run of fixtures game week 8, right? I'm looking at it on the face of it and going, I might want to flip that to Foden or KDB at that point. Okay, fine. It gives me some competitive City coverage potentially as well. But if I'm not confident about it, I ain't going there. And you'd almost rather stick with Palmer. Well, Palmer's got difficult fixtures. Yeah, but Palmer's going to get me 90 minutes every week there. He's on the pens. He's talisman for them. Cool. Whereas the City guy, good fixtures, bit of rotation. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the decision is for that yet. But right now, I'd rather have Cole Palmer in my team than a Foden or a De Bruyne, for example. And it's partly because of that. Sundini15 says, should you sell Isak for a Duran punt even though he does not start? I have João Pedro, Isak and Watkins as forwards. I see Duran went up in price last night. I guess that's one that's... I would guess that's not popular with the analytic crowd at the moment because of obviously the minute side of things. So I couldn't be buying a player that I didn't think was going to start. Great. He's amazing off the bench, etc. I couldn't be buying a player for FPL that I didn't think would start. End. D.80 this afternoon. James Hope was where I suppose this is both an FPL question and non-FPL question. How you feeling about Solanke? Feels like Spurs haven't got going yet. I'm going to skip that because I spoke about him quite a bit earlier in the stream. But I will add on to that and say, look, a little bit like what Andrew's also said today. That's the forward that I wanted. And I think he will, moving forward, do well for us. JP says, Havertz going to be an 8 instead of a 9 now with an injury. Jesus, the 9. I think you'll probably see Havertz and Trossard similar to Sunday would be my similar to Sunday gone. This coming Sunday would be my expectation, and I still think there would be favouritism for Havertz to be 9 in the majority of the forthcoming fixtures. Arguably even more so without Odegaard because it gives them more of a direct option. They can go direct into him if they want to. And if Odegaard is going to be out for a while, Arsenal will have to consider some different measures to get around that creativity, and Havertz's height will help with that. And so my instinct would be that he would still largely stay as the number 9. Remember as well that you've got Rice coming back into the squad this weekend, and I think within a few weeks you probably got Mikel Merino added to that as well. So I would largely still expect Havertz to primarily, not always, but primarily be the number 9. Referee Rick says, hi James, on wildcard, would you do Watkins and Sade or Solanke and Garnacho? If I was on wildcard right now, I'd have to take the Watkins route, almost irrespective of the other players in contention for me. Prashan says, hi James, with Isak most likely out this game week, which forward below? Yeah, I've done lots of, I get it. Isak's getting sold a lot. I think we've answered it, mate. Jake G says, hi James, have you ever watched Australian rules football? Grand final is on next weekend and might be a decent one to tune in on. It's one of those things that I've probably in the more of my younger years would have passed by, perhaps on like a Sunday morning, seen it on Sky before goals on Sunday or something like that maybe. Yeah, cool. Like, it's not for me. Neither is American football. You're not going to get me interested into these sports, I'm afraid. I'm a snob like that, if you wish. Birth Media says, hi James. Spanish accent. Okay, repeat. Hi Jaime. Best player per position for the next 7 games, excluding Haaland and Salah plays. Next 7 games. Per position, excluding Haaland, Salah. Okay. Watkins up front. Midfield. Got to be Saka really, but from a pound per pound perspective, I'm very tempted to say Bumo. Defender, Trent probably still, maybe Gabriel. Goalkeeper, Raya. Excuse me. JP says, will City Arsenal be another boring 0-0? It might be, mate. I don't have a crystal ball. Owen Wilson says, Spurs were rubbish against Coventry. What does that say about Spurs' recruitment of squad players? Is spending 30 million on players like Archie Gray and Bergwall should be beating Coventry easily. Okay. Yeah, listen, we're not excusing the performance on Wednesday night. Archie Gray's 18. Lucas Bergwall, I think he's also 18. I would not be putting those players as the players to name as part of that. You want to shame the other experienced players that played in the Tottenham team on Wednesday night. Sure, I wouldn't put it on the 2 18-year-old boys. I mean, the away end booed when Bergwall got taken off as an example, which is also stupid because, as I've said on these streams several times over, we haven't seen him capable of playing 45 minutes yet, and that's the first time he played 60. Do I think Archie Gray's regularly to be playing regularly? No. Am I going to dig him out? He's an 18-year-old boy. The only way I want to win the league, right? I want Tottenham to get back in the Champions League. I want to win the league. The only way Tottenham are going to win the league is by doing things differently, and we've missed out on way too many young talents because we've not focused on it. So if the club wants to focus on these players, the likes of Wilson, Odeberg, good, go for it. Some will work, some won't. They are not the players I'd be singling out. If you want to bash the recruitment, I don't have a problem with that. But I wouldn't single out the 2 youngest players who played the other night. JB says, hi James, would you leave Wissa on the bench, have 0.1 contingency, and assuming João Pedro gets minutes, can afford leaving him to game week 6 and extra info on best cheap player, just get DCL, Vardy or Wood? Right, I've done the players. This is out for 2 months, mate. Sell. There's nothing to think about here. Honestly, there's nothing to think. It was out for 2 weeks. What we 2 months. What we benching it for? Just get rid, mate. Jerry says, 4th FPL question. What are your thoughts on getting Semenyo in 6 since they're playing Southampton and Leicester in 6 and 7? Despite horrible fixtures in 8-10 where I can bench him for Vardy. Okay, yeah, fine. Which one are you going to bench in 7? Just out of interest. Because they're playing each other. I don't think I particularly want to bench either. I'm looking at the rest of the fixtures in 7 and trying to work out even what you might be benching instead. Could be a Fulham player maybe you might have, would be, yeah, cool. That works really nicely if you had a Fulham player. Yeah, sure. I'm not going to say to you don't get Semenyo for Southampton and Leicester, right? You want to get him, get him. I'm not going to tell you anything you don't know there, I don't think. Hitesh says, hi James, any thoughts on when to switch a Liverpool attacker for Bowen? Have both Jota and Diaz. Cheers and all the best to you, the missus and Harry. I think anything beyond this week is pretty reasonable. Liverpool gets tougher from 8, but they're still at home to Chelsea. And West Ham go to Tottenham. Create your own narrative whether that is a good or a bad fixture for Jared Bowen. If you go in 6, for example, you can have Ipswich at home in 7. If the Liverpool player that you own continues to play, I would say it's probably game week 9. If it doesn't, then sooner, frankly. B Badger says, hello. I'm going to do up to B Badger's got another comment. I'm going to take that in. I'm not going to cover any more beyond that because that'll take us up to an hour. So I'll do 5 more. I'll do them fairly quick fire. Eddie R says, hey James, 1 free transfer on wildcard 6. If I roll, I have to start 2 out of Quansah, Hall, Vardiol and Harwood Bellis. Would you roll? And if so, which 2 would you start? Or play one of them and move Vardiol to Porro Robertson? Right. Well, Vardiol will highly likely play. Harwood Bellis will play. And those are the 2 I'll be backing for a clean sheet out of the 4 of them this week anyway. So, and Liverpool as well, to fairness. But yeah, what we banking on Quansah starting can easily be a 1-pointer, couldn't it? Play Vardiol and Harwood Bellis, I think, from that, mate. And Eddie says as well, says, hey again, 1 free transfer on wildcard 6. Would you do Isak, João Pedro to Solanke, Watkins, Vardy, DCL, or just roll through the wildcard? Have Smith Rowe first bench. Yeah, if you've got Isak and João Pedro, I think you should probably make a call. I think João Pedro will play. I have no intel. That's just my instinct. Knowing that he was back in training on Wednesday, they didn't take a chance against Wolves. He hadn't trained fully. He was rejoining the team today. I think he'll play tomorrow. Owen Wilson also says Pep and Arteta are 2 of the best managers in the world, and in my opinion, they're both defence first. Will Ange ever change to be like that? And if he doesn't, we'll be able to compete for titles. This discussion again, refer back to, and I realise not everyone's listened to it, but bollocks, I'm going to sell Patreon. On our Tottenham podcast on Wednesday, we discussed this a little bit with Clayton, where I said, reflect on that Arsenal team from the start 2 years ago. I said, is this Arsenal team anything like the Arsenal team from 2 years ago? Remember, at that point, they'd just missed out on the top 4. They had a terrible end to the season. They lost 5 of their last 9 games, I think. And then at the start of the next season, bang, it clicked. They were destroying teams, but they had vulnerabilities and they were destroying teams offensively. Then they got themselves in a position after the World Cup. Defensively, they improved and something began to come away from them offensively. Now, it might be Tottenham's next cycle, by the way, in terms of improving the defence. You know what the Tottenham need to do most to improve the defence? Buy better midfield players, mate. Is the best thing that's going to improve Tottenham defensively. Because that midfield, at the moment, as a whole, as a squad, to compete, is not good enough. It needs upgrading. That will improve. So I reflect, however, on that Arteta team from a couple of years ago. How good were Arsenal defensively at the start of that season? You go and have a look back, mate. How many goals they kept conceding at home? Actually, a lot of their clean sheets were away from home. You might remember me discussing this on a few COTCs with Adam Pritchard. Why do you keep conceding at home? So I think they've evolved as a team from the team that began to challenge 2 years ago. My team isn't hit that stage 1 yet, right? It's distance away. Distance away. It might. It might. It might evolve to become something better defensively. I don't know how we can know. If Tottenham stay as offensive as they are, then do Tottenham ever probably win a league title under Andrew? Probably not. But I at the moment, I wouldn't even dream of changing. I'm absolutely certain in my mind that anybody who thinks Ange shouldn't be Tottenham manager at the moment either A, doesn't support the football club, which that would be the majority of you, that's okay, or anybody within the football club who does believe they want it to change has really hit a wall of impatience, and they need to have patience because that football club was on the floor when he walked in the door, and it's playing better football. I certainly concede that Wednesday night was horrendous and almost unforgivable. It was that bad. But give it time. Give it some time. How good was Arteta 2 years into his job with Arsenal? Give it some time. You're not just go, 15 months, it's not working, change. Tottenham conceded 4 goals in 4 games, mate. Includes playing arguably the team I think will win the league at home and Newcastle away, where we conceded 10 on our last 2 visits prior to this one. Actually, I think we are beginning to improve defensively. Matt Lacking says, hi James, hope you're well. Feel like I messed up on wildcard. Went for Palmer over Watkins. Would you do Palmer and Pedro to Boomer and Watkins for free? Or hold and use free transfers next week to get Saka, Gabriel? Priority for me would be the Arsenal players, mate. And B Badger says, can have the last one. Says, I don't own Salah. Don't want the armband on Haaland. Original plan was Isak. But with injury, I've landed on a Bowen transfer in and captain. Am I overthinking? And is Haaland a much safer option? He's definitely a safer option, mate. And you're asking me the question. I can only advise that that's probably the right play. Thanks everyone who contributed in the chat. Big thanks. Sorry to those who I didn't get to your questions. Again, if you want to tag me on Twitter, I will happily answer your question during the course of the rest of the day. If you slide into my DMs, I probably won't even read your tweet. I'll probably just delete it, especially if it has the word false. If you want to support the show, it's www.patreon.com/planetfpl. Do it because you want to support the show or because you want the additional content. Next week, I can tell you the free content next week will be Game Review Pod Monday. Clash of Correspondence Tuesday is Arsenal versus Leicester with Adam Pritchard and Aaron Lagor. Clayton and James show Wednesday. People's Poll will be on Thursday next week, and Ask James will be next Friday. It will have to be, unfortunately, at an earlier time, probably around about 12 o'clock, because I'm on dad duty from school next Friday. But other than that, have a great weekend. Deadline stream for those on YouTube, 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. For the benefit of those on the audio, cue music, please, man child.